Welcome to this Food.News exclusive interview with Ruben Flamer. He's the founder of Natural Food Certifiers, one of the better known organic certifiers across America. And here today is going to talk with us about what it means to become certified organic and some of the things you may not have known about the organic industry. So thank you for joining me in studio today, Ruben.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here. Your company has certified like how many farms and manufacturers across America?
Well, from an organic point of view, we're kind of small. We have a couple hundred separate entities. A lot of those companies have other private labels that they do within their own manufacturing environments, so it kind of spiders down to a whole bunch of other levels.
Sure.
But most of our certification is in the manufacturing, the end, the last stage before it gets to the consumer, unless it's just a fruit or a vegetable from the farm. And we're also involved in GMO, gluten, vegan, and kosher.
So you have certifications for all those classifications,
yeah.
Non-GMO, gluten-free,
Right.
vegan certified,
And
kosher certified.
Right.
That's okay, great. So you cover the gamut of what most people are concerned with about their food. But isn't it true that what are some of the misconceptions that people have about, let's say, what these certifications really mean, or what do they need to know that maybe they don't know about being certified?
One of the concerns in the organic world, in the United States, besides it being needed to have a level playing field and everyone on the same standard, was teeth. How do you put teeth into a system that has no government backing?
You mean
how do you
enforcement?
enforce it? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So that was the motivation to go with the USDA. And that gives it legal backing and strength and the power of the government behind enforcing, making sure that people don't put out products that say organic when they're not, and so forth.
So just for viewers to understand the structure, the USDA sits on top of all of this, and then the USDA certifies certifiers like your company.
Correct.
Then to go out and do the audits and inspections and look at the paperwork and maybe catch cheaters from time to time, and then
set policy.
And set policy. Okay.
But the setting policy, that's the interesting part, is that it comes from the ground up. Because it was started from the private sector, it's not the USDA hiring a bunch of government workers to do the job. It's more, there is an office, there's a national organic program that's run, but a lot of the companies are private companies, and then there's what's called the National Organic Standard Board, which meets, I think it's twice a year now, and they meet and they decide, is this going to be considered organically approvable, let's say an ingredient, or big discussion now is poultry, animal rights, if you wish, humane treatment of animals, how does that fit into organic? It does for sure fit in, but the question is how? What's humane, what's not humane? Those are things that are gray areas that there's a lot of discussion involved and a lot of stakeholders. So it takes a while, but eventually gets done.
Yes, in our laboratory, we test for pesticides and heavy metals, and there's no such thing as 100% free of every molecule of every pesticide. For example, we've had people bring us honey. We have never found honey that's free of pesticides.
Of course not.
Because bees are traveling. They're traveling around. And there's no planet that doesn't use pesticides that the bees are going off to, Mars or something and coming back. So all the honey has some amount in it. What I've noticed, though, is that sometimes the mainstream media will raise a false alarm over a very tiny amount that is scientifically inconsequential. They will say, oh, there was, let's say, a pesticide or an herbicide detected in infant formula, but they won't give the amount. Well, how many micrograms per milligram? They don't give the amount. It doesn't mean anything to me as a scientist because it's the concentration that matters.
This also, I think, is going to change as time goes by in terms of organic and the certification process and the testing of herbicides and insecticides and pesticides and all the different, we don't even get into heavy metals really.
Right. that's another area that people have had a lot of questions about organics. Does it cover heavy metals?
Right, and I think that there's a plus and a minus, but it's a government-run system. Go to the National Organic Standards Board, petition that there should be some new institution of heavy metal, valuation when you're doing organic, because right now the rules don't say that. You could kind of squeeze it out that it does in certain ways, but you'd be probably hard-pressed not to find someone who would argue right back to you and say it's not there. So,
well, surely there are no strict limits there currently. We've
Right.
looked as well.
Right.
But I think, this is just my opinion, but I think that the organic standard would be more meaningful and have more trust if there were some strict heavy metals limits. So maybe they'll consider that down the road.
right. I mean, obviously there's certain EPA limits that are set, but it's not technically, organic's not covering it in a really strong way. That's for sure.
But as you said, the origins of organic were focused more on the agricultural inputs, which is usually the synthetic pesticides or herbicides and so on. And a lot of the heavy metals, those aren't inputs typically. Those are maybe there in the soil, and a plant like turmeric, as we both know, sometimes has high lead in it, or if it's grown in a contaminated area, usually in another country. We've tested turmeric in Hawaii, very clean.
Right.
But the same turmeric from a different country overseas can be very contaminated.
Right.
But they didn't add the metal, they didn't add lead to the crop.
Right. There was no reason to do that, right? And that opens up a whole new vista of how do you think about food and choices in food. Even if you're going to buy organic food, the old joke in the organic world is, when will there be an organic Oreo cookie? And I don't know, maybe there is one, I'm not sure. But you have to make choices that are based on health, that is still your independent domain, that's part of your lifestyle choice that a certifier can't mandate and doesn't mandate.
There was a big medical study published recently that pointed to processed food as being one of the main drivers of degenerative disease globally, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, even Alzheimer's and so on. And as you sort of hinted at there, even processed food can be organic. So it's up to the consumer to have that
Correct.
discernment about, am I going to call myself organic, but I'm just eating, organic snack chips and organic cookies, or are you going to actually go for real unprocessed food?
Right. You have that in the GMO label world, where there's GMOs on water, GMO labels on water. Well, there's no
on
GMO.
water?
Yes, there's no GMO water out there. It's almost become, I don't understand what's driving that consumer's thought in general in the marketplace on that level.
Non-GMO salt.
Right. You'll find it just about on everything, that it's almost like a housekeeping seal of good housekeeping. So again, you have to, when it comes to food, you have to be aware, and you have to educate yourself.
Yeah.
Everyone to his own level of how he wants to do that, or she wants to do that. It's a long-term process, right?
Well, if you think about it, I mean, absolutely. For consumers, though, the USDA label is a kind of mental shortcut for the consumer, which is a benefit to them because they're trusting that seal means that someone like you has gone to a manufacturer or a farm and you have checked them out. You've looked at the paperwork, you've challenged their records and so on. And that trust is legitimate because you're actually doing that, and the organic certifiers are doing that. But as you say, there may be other symbols on foods where the consumer doesn't really know what's behind that symbol, let's say.
Well, again, I think one symbol for the mainstream consumer is GMO. I don't think the average person knows what a GMO is.
That's probably true.
And they may or may not know why they would choose not to consume GMOs.
Well, like we saw this with a lot of gluten-free foods, turned out to be using genetically engineered ingredients, right?
Well, yeah, we just
that.
came out with a policy in our company that we're not certifying any gluten foods that have GMOs in them as part of the gluten-free label. And we're called natural food certifiers, so we still stick with the natural food profile. So because Well, there's two consuming groups when it comes to gluten, for example. One are people who are celiacs and they have real health issues when it comes to the gluten, and other people who it's a fad, it's a trend, it's a good way to lose weight because you're eating less white flour usually. We have a new client now, for example, that's puts out an organic bread. 4 generations in Europe, really artisan bread makers. And his motto comes from his mentor, which is, before there was only organic, because they didn't have any pesticides and everything.
Right, good point.
When there was only organic, there was the word obesity was never found. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's their motto on their bread. And they say in Europe, old-fashioned Europe, people would eat a pound of bread a day.
Huh.
And they would get their proteins, they would get and they wouldn't eat all the other stuff that we eat, and they eat a lot less of the stuff that we do eat, meat, eggs, chicken, whatever it is, and they were just slimmer.
Uh-huh.
And they claim, they want to say it was because they ate bread. The gluten people would say, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Celiacs is one thing. But if you're going to eat gluten-free for whatever is motivating you, and you're feeding yourself GMOs, and you're feeding yourselves artificial colors, so that it should taste like a gluten product, I mean, to me, that's a little insane.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive, but it's happening. That's the organic Oreo syndrome.
Well, we've also seen, the gluten issue is a very complex issue, and it's very personalized to your metabolism and your body chemistry, but we've seen, I believe, convincing evidence that some of the people who think that they are gluten sensitive are actually perhaps sensitive to maybe glyphosate that's in some of the wheat products. Exactly. Because it's used as a desiccant. So there may be, some of these food crazes sometimes, they sort of become detached from the medical reality of what's going on. And then gluten has become like a fiend, this evil thing in food. And like you said, people have been eating gluten for, tens of thousands of years without a problem for the most part.
There's another component, to health that I've noticed. And when I first got into the natural food industry, it was way back in '74, and I was in Canada. So we were always behind, the trends of the trendsetters in the United States. We couldn't find organic food in 1974 when we had a natural food co-op. And it was a real strong trend and fad at the time in Quebec, where I come from, where there were a lot of people who were macrobiotic.
Oh yeah, sure.
And they were very, very religious about their macrobiotics. And I found something this is going to sound funny coming from me, I find something about religious people who are very religious. Well, I don't mean how they conduct themselves. I look religious, I follow a lot of rules, but I'm talking about in their internal way of processing their religion that makes them less healthy despite whatever they're doing. And when it comes to eating and whether you're vegan or whether you're gluten-free or whether you're organic, if you're anxious about what you eat, and if you eat, you take something by mistake and your life falls apart because you ate something outside your diet regimen, joy, I think, brings more health than a lot of the food stuff that most people are concerned about. And if you're eating healthy food and you're just anxiety-ridden and I don't want to say depressed, but if you're not joyous, you're still going to get the same diseases you're trying to avoid.
So yeah, people need to chill out mentally. You can pursue healthy food, but also don't forget your mental health at the same time.
100%.
Fascinating. We're interviewing Ruben Flamer of Natural Food Certifiers here for Food.News. Obviously, he's got a lot of wisdom from the industry. Much more to share with us here. We'll continue in part 2. Thank you for joining us so far. My name is Mike Adams, the publisher of Food.News. Thank you for watching. If you want to support our mission, visit us at healthrangerstore.com for the world's largest selection of lab-verified superfood and nutritional products for healthy living. It's at healthrangerstore.com.